Hi everybody, Joel Silverman here from Silverman Law Office. We're here to talk about the most frequently asked questions in liquor and gaming. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, should you own the liquor license in your name or in a company? Well, that answer really depends on your situation. Everybody's in a little different situation. Are you trying to create some tax savings? Or are there any tax savings to be had? Are there liability concerns? So those kinds of questions are really what lead into the answers for that. But more often than not, you definitely are looking to put that inside a company of some sort, depending on your state law. So now let's talk about the application for a liquor license. Every state's different. Some states, it's a one-page application. It's super simple. And it's just a small application fee. In other states like Montana, it's a very complicated process. Montana still recognizes the three-tier alcohol system. So here in Montana, we have the wholesaler who distributes the alcohol, the beer, the wine. We have the manufacturer that creates the alcohol. And then we have the retailer, and that's usually the bar, the restaurant, or it could even be a convenience store. So it just depends on the type of license you've got or that you're trying to get. But that application process in Montana is very similar to Nevada. So it's a lengthy process, takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months, is very standard for an application to get through. So oftentimes when a client's trying to buy a liquor license or sell a liquor license, a big issue comes up, and that is, do I need to have my taxes paid up current? In most states, that's a no. In Montana, however, that's a definite yes. If both the seller and the buyer are not current on the taxes, in both filing and paying, then the State Department of Revenue is going to hold up the transaction. So a lot of times with our clients, they end up asking us, Joel, do I have to go through a background check if I'm just buying a liquor license and not having gaming privileges? And the answer is a definitive yes. You have to go through the background check. There's no way around it. Montana still follows the old rule of the old three-tier gaming system and alcohol system, so that you're facing that background check that they require you to go through, that's just like the feds. So you have to fill out a long sheet, fingerprint cards, what they call a personal history statement, and they go through very, very detailed of your background. Any violations you've had, whether as a professional or speeding tickets, any DUIs, fish and game violations they even get into, so you've got to list it all out there. It's very important that your background, your personal history statement be filled out very thoroughly. So let's get into your premises. Your premises where you're going to store and serve alcohol, that's very key. So that has to have a floor plan as part of your application. That floor plan's very, very critical, because during the application process, a Department of Justice investigator is going to come out and inspect your premises to make sure that your floor plan that you've submitted on paper matches the floor plan as it sits. We see a lot of violations where somebody changes their floor plan and they don't submit the change in floor plan to the Department of Justice and Departments of Revenue so that their floor plan in reality matches what's on the paper. We get a lot of violation clients from that year in and year out where they just aren't keeping up on that paperwork, so we want to make sure everybody's current on that. Another incredibly important part of the application is, where do you get the funds to purchase the license? Now, from the real estate side is not so important, because the real estate company is not part of the licensing application, but the lease is. So something that's come up that's really important now is that the owner of the real estate cannot be somebody involved in one of the other 3 tiers of the system. So as a bar, the building cannot be owned by a manufacturer or a wholesaler. So we got to be careful there, because then that also plays into, where does my money come from? And that's really important, because as part of the background investigation, you're going to either get money from an institutional lender like a bank, or a non-institutional lender, a non-bank, and that money is very critical, because based on the history in Montana, that the Department of Justice wants to ensure that that money is not coming from improper sources. So we got to make sure that your financing's all lined out, and we help people, hundreds of people a year, get through that process. So if you have questions on financing, give us a shout. Okay, so now we're getting to the easy stuff. Let's talk bank accounts. The bank account for the operating company of the liquor license should be separate than the bank account for the real estate company. So if you have two different companies, one in the real estate, one for the liquor licensee, you got to keep those bank accounts separate. What about for yourself? Again, got to keep them separate. Anything that is a bill for the liquor license has to be paid through that bank account. Anything that's your personal bills, you want to pay through your own personal account. But you do have to set up your own bank account for the liquor licensee, and that means you also have to get an employer identification number. So that's really key. Okay, so I've been touching around on the real estate. Real estate's important here as well. So I hit on it a little bit earlier. The question is, do you need to own the real estate where the bar is located? You don't need to own it, but you have to have what's called a possessory interest. That means you've got to be able to show that you control the real estate within which you're operating. Usually that's a lease agreement, more often than not, but sometimes we have the real estate and the liquor license owned in the same company. We choose not to do that personally here, but what we're always looking for is, do we have the right lease agreements in place? Do we have the right type of contracts in place around that? Because maybe you're leasing more than just one area in a building, or if you've got any gaps in the areas that you're leasing. So it creates different challenges for that application. So we just have to be very careful about that. Okay, so now we're at the point where we're talking about operating the business. And a lot of our clients ask, well, Joel, can I put a manager in place? Do I actually have to run the day-to-day aspects of the business? And that answer is no. The Department of Revenue and Department of Justice, by state law, have to allow you to have a manager that can operate that business without you. So you could be off having fun, living somewhere outside of Montana, and have a manager that runs your day-to-day business. But we have to go through the right steps with that manager, and we help people all the time with that. It's actually a fairly easy process that we can help get you through effortlessly and get you to the right end result. And the operation. Oh boy, here's a good one. Do you need a city license? Well, when you read the statutes, it doesn't say anything about a city license. The city just can't put any more requirements on your liquor license, but they can make you go get a city operational license for an alcohol establishment. So there's a lot of cities in Montana and elsewhere in the country that require you to have a city operator license for an alcohol establishment. So you want to be very careful about that. In Montana, the perfect example is Bozeman. You got to have a separate city license to be able to own and operate a bar or to sell alcohol in city limits of Bozeman. So let's say you've got a liquor license. A lot of times we hear, well, why can't I just get gaming machines with my liquor license? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. Not every license is allowed gaming privileges. So you've got to make sure when you go to buy that license that it does have the gaming privileges to it, so that if you do want to have machines, if you want to create a casino or you just want to have a few machines in there, that it's got gaming privileges. And by the way, your gaming privileges also apply to things like shake-a-day, having boards, pull tabs. For those of you that don't know what a pull tab is, don't be surprised because that's a Butte thing, but it's a fun little way to increase revenues in your bar, increase participation. So got to make sure you've got the gaming privileges to be able to partake in those type of gaming events. And then last but not least, before you can actually open your doors, you have to go through a premise inspection. So that premise inspection is where the DOJ investigator comes out to your licensed establishment before you get to open your doors, or what we call final approval. And that licensing specialist investigator comes out, looks at your premises, make sure it matches the floor plan, make sure that you have 4 walls, right? That if you've got a patio, that the patio has a barrier with it. And then they also check, where do you store the alcohol? Where are your gaming machines located? Do you have the right number of seats? So they look at everything to make sure that you match the requirements by state law as to what is a qualified floor plan. So folks, I want to thank you for joining us today. If you have any more specific questions, and if we created some new questions for you from these FAQs, give us a call here at Silverman Law Office. We look forward to hearing from you, and we can't wait to help you. Thanks for joining.